Somewhere in the world right now, there's a woman, and we don't know her name. We don't know if she has a family or how old she is or what she's planning to do with her life this spring. We don't know if she's in a basement or in a hospital, standing in a kitchen trying to decide whether any of the ordinary things still apply. We don't know her, but she's real. She is specific. She has a face and she has a name. And today, on International Women's Day, she is who this sermon is for. What does it actually cost us to pay attention? There's a long tradition in spiritual life of treating attention as a gentle practice, something we do at the edge of a pond or on a meditation cushion or on a quiet walk at the end of a work week. Something that opens us to beauty, to gratitude, to the ordinary miracle of being alive. And sure, it does those things. But there's a deeper tradition, a harder practice that tells us something else. That genuine attention is not always a gift we receive. Sometimes it's the cost we pay. When we open ourselves up to truly seeing, we do not get to curate what we see. We open the window to our heart, and reality pours through it, rushing like a river, sometimes like a raging river. This past week, reality poured in as bombs, as war, as the United States entered a very specific conflict with Iran. Now, it may have brought up memories in our bodies that we didn't recall until that moment when the news broke. It sure did for me. Those of us who grew up in the era of the Iran hostage crisis, grew up with hostage counts every morning in school and the tying of yellow ribbons on trees. Those memories, the memories of school children trying to understand the world, stored in my body, in our bodies. You may have felt, as I did, those memories come alive again, and the trauma-inducing as they might be, the weight of this conflict falls most immediately and most brutally, not on people who decided it, but on people who were simply living there. Particularly the women, as it always has been. To pay attention, to refuse the comfortable numbing that the news cycle offers us, is a spiritual act. It's also a deeply demanding one. Because once you've truly seen something, you can't unsee it as hard as you might try. And that changes you, and it's supposed to. It lives in the memory of your body long after that consciousness fades. And what would it look like? What would it feel like if we refused to look away? Out of a long line of history, there's a long line of women who refused to look away, who saw what others turned from, named it, and kept going. And there are so many women I could have chosen this morning, but I call 3 of them into this room today out of a long, fierce, largely uncelebrated line who feel, to me, very close to the moment that we are living in. So let me tell you a little about them. The first is Ida B. Wells. You may believe you know her. You at least know her name. So let me lift up why I chose her story. Ida was a journalist, a woman who survived enough loss and violence in her own life to have been forgiven for turning away. And she didn't. Ida B. Wells spent her life doing what no one else in America's public life was willing to do. She counted. She documented the lynchings of people who looked like her. The names, the places, the dates, the specific details of specific human beings at a time when the powerful forces depended on those deaths remaining abstract, remaining statistics somewhere, remaining invisible. Her newspaper office was destroyed in retaliation for her reports, and she continued anyway, taking that naming on the road and lecturing in England, refusing to let the world stay comfortable with the not seeing. She understood at a cellular level that the first act of justice is seeing, and that the machinery of injustice runs on our willingness to look the other way. Ida B. Wells died March 25th, 1931, and she never stopped counting. The second woman I name is Viola Liuzzo. Now, some of you may think you know that name and that you knew her in some way. Viola was a white Detroit Unitarian Universalist, a woman with 5 children and no particular training in organizing. She watched the footage of Bloody Sunday on her television, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the state troopers, the beatings, and something shifted in her that she could not shift back. She'd seen something she couldn't unsee. She felt something. And she understood that her personal discomfort with the seeing was not the point. So she drove to Selma. She shuttled marchers. She showed up quietly and without fanfare because she had looked at something real and couldn't pretend it was otherwise. On the night of March 25th, 1965, she was shot and killed by the Ku Klux Klan. Shuttling an individual, an African-American man, between Selma and Montgomery. After her death, she was not celebrated. For many years, she was not lifted at all. She was criticized, in fact. The FBI leaked smear campaigns on her character. Commentators questioned why a mother had left her children to get involved with something for someone else. She was slowly and steadily erased from history that she actually helped make. Even in death, the world found ways to look away from her. Then there's Alice Paul. Maybe you've heard of her. Maybe. Alice was a Quaker from New Jersey, a slight woman, soft-spoken, and absolutely immovable in conviction. She had studied in England, where she marched with suffragettes. She was arrested 3 times there and learned firsthand what it cost a woman to make her body an instrument of protest. And then she came home, and she looked at the suffrage movement, decades of careful, patient, dignified process. And dignified was not what she saw. She decided that careful, patient, and dignified were no longer enough. So in 1917, she and the National Women's Party stood in a silent vigil outside the White House. Every single day, in the cold, they held banners addressing a message directly to President Wilson that said, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?" Now, she and her comrades were mocked, they were threatened, they were arrested, placed in a workhouse where they were beaten, thrown in dark cells, and denied basic necessities. Alice Paul was placed in solitary confinement. When she and others launched a hunger strike, the warden ordered them to be force-fed, held down while tubes were forced down their nose. She knew then what she was walking into, and she went anyway. She led anyway. And here's what history books smooth over. Many of the established suffragists, the leaders, publicly distanced themselves from Paul's tactics because they were too radical and too confrontational, too willing to let a woman be broken in public. But Paul understood something that Wells and Liuzzo also understood. The machinery of injustice depends not just on its opponents looking away. It depends on its allies staying comfortable. 3 years after Paul's release from prison, the 19th Amendment was ratified. She was 35 years old. She spent the next 5 decades working on the Equal Rights Amendment, which still has not been ratified. Paul died July 9th, 1977. She never stopped paying attention, not once. Now, these 3 women didn't share politics or strategy or even an era. They shared a practice. They saw what the world was determined not to see. They named it, they paid for it, and they kept going. This is the tradition that we are standing in this morning. Wars are decided by people with power, and they're paid for by people without it. The currency, the human currency, the body currency, is almost always disproportionately drawn from women. Not because women are fragile, but because in every conflict, in every era, women are the ones left to hold the immediate human cost. They're the ones serving in hospitals, the ones trying to find food, the ones keeping the children alive in the shelters, the ones who have already survived one revolution, one war, one regime, and can't believe they're being asked to survive another. Iranian women have been carrying an extraordinary weight for decades on the front line of resistance against their own government brutality, against restrictions on their most basic freedoms. They were not waiting to be rescued. They were already fighting. And now a new war has arrived on top of everything they were already carrying. To honor these women and the ones in our history today, the ones in the present, right? Without seeing the women in Iran right now, this week, in present tense, would be to do what the world has been doing to women all along. Celebrating the idea of them while ignoring the reality of them. Simone Weil, a French Jewish philosopher and mystic who gave her own life eventually in solidarity for the suffering with others, wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." Now, she wasn't describing a feeling, she was describing the discipline, the act of turning your full self toward another person, the profound act of emptying yourself from your own agenda, your own projected story, and simply receiving the other as they are. Now, we can't reach the women in Iran whose names we do not know, and we cannot stop what is happening to her. But we can refuse to let her be a statistic. We can insist in this room that she is specific, that she has a face, that her life carries the same weight as any life we would grieve. Parker Palmer says it this way: the human soul does not want to be fixed. It simply wants to be seen and heard. We can't fix it, but we can see it. We can let her land, unnamed, real, and specific, in our moral imagination, and let her stay there. That's not nothing. In a world organized in forgetting, it's an act of resistance. And we, of course, hold a conviction that is non-negotiable, that every person possesses inherent worth and dignity. Every person, including the women in Iran whose names we don't know, including every civilian absorbing the cost of a decision they didn't make and can't undo. To stay with that is painful, to refuse to scroll past or to keep our attention on those who are paying the highest price, is in itself a form of witness. It is what Wells did, what Liuzzo did, what Paul did. That's what we're called to do. And yet, we cannot stay only in the darkness. Not because that darkness isn't real. It is. But because the women we honor today did not abandon beauty in order to face suffering. They held both because they had to. Ida B. Wells loved music. She raised children and she built institutions while documenting atrocities. Viola tucked her children in bed before she left for Selma, giving them a blessing. Alice Paul found sustaining joy in the community of women who stood vigil beside her, even in the cold, even when it cost them everything. They didn't wait for the world to be fixed before allowing it to also be beautiful. They didn't allow beauty to become an excuse to stop looking at what was broken. Adrienne Marie Brown shares this reflection. Your heart will still break. You will know grief, but you will find a reasonable cost for the random abundance of miracles, the soft, wild rhythm of love. The chalice we light every week holds both light and dark. Simply by being lit, it casts a shadow. And we're not here only to be light. We're here to be honest. To be honest about the shadows, too. And to stay lit anyway. Somewhere right now in Iran, there's a woman whose name we do not know. And she's still there. We carry her with us when we leave this room. in our prayers, in our protests, in our phone calls to the people who represent us, and our refusal to let it become background noise when we remember her. In the quality of attention we bring to the next story, the next vote, the next moment when the world asks us to look the other way. We do what the women in history have always done, even through darkness. We see, we name, and we refuse to forget. Pay attention. Be astonished. And tell the world about it. May you hold this in your heart. May it be so. Amen.